You know, it's pretty interesting because Donald Trump got 77 million votes, 312 electoral college votes, the best performance of a Republican since 1988, and yet we have a 5-seat majority in the House.
Yeah.
And you have people like Rufus online saying, oh, well, the GOP is ruined because of Donald Trump. Well, if Donald Trump's the one always outperforming,
Right.
is he the problem or is it the GOP?
Right.
I
Not
think the GOP is the problem.
Right.
Because the old establishment brand of the GOP is not friendly to the American electorate. Donald Trump changed electoral politics and made himself the friendly Republican brand.
All right, you guys, I'm joined today by a great panel of some of the best and biggest election YouTubers on the internet. Alan Lichtman hates these two, fears these two, some would say. So does J.N. Selzer. But we're joined today by Ready Go Politics and On Point Politics. You can find them both on YouTube. How you guys doing?
Doing well. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
For sure. So, look, we could do another video, and I think we will, frankly. Just living back the 2024 election and still, gloating about it. But honestly, right now, I have to say I'm a little concerned for the future because 2028, that's a long ways away. But I look at 2026, our House majority is so slim. Mike Johnson, questionable speaker. Are you concerned at all, especially looking at the way the spending bill was handled, that Republicans, especially on the House level, may drop the ball in 2 years and ruin the trifecta?
Well, this is what they usually do. I mean,
Yeah.
we always are able to win an election somehow, and then we squander power. And
Right.
Donald Trump is somebody who got elected because he gave people a vision. He talked about issues that a lot of people in the Republican establishment haven't talked about. But the Republican establishment still is not willing to get with the program. They're too busy caving to the donors, caving to the uniparty, caving to the globalists, and that's why they're pushing through all these spending bills. And as a result, you're seeing what's happening. And in order to win elections, you have to have people that get out and vote for you. And in order to win in 2026, they need to actually enact Trump's agenda and provide the American people with success. That's how they go out there and win, and that's how they produce results for the American people.
You know, it's pretty interesting because Donald Trump got 77 million votes, 312 electoral college votes, the best performance of a Republican since 1988, and yet we have a 5-seat majority in the House.
Yeah.
And you have people like Rufus online saying, oh, well, the GOP is ruined because of Donald Trump. Well, if Donald Trump's the one always outperforming,
Right.
is he the problem or is it the GOP?
Right.
I
Not the
think the
problem.
GOP is the problem.
Right.
Because the old establishment brand of the GOP is not friendly to the American electorate. Donald Trump changed electoral politics and made himself the friendly Republican brand.
Right.
And so now you have all of these people that are lifetime servants for themselves, have been there for years, or just get in recently, like Dan Crenshaw. And you have all these people that like to profit off of citizens because they think they can force all of this pork agenda through. And I think it's just unacceptable. I think that when you pass legislation, you need to go one law at a time, because when you have all these pork legislations, that's how you get the $60 billion for Ukraine type of stuff. So that's kind of my take on that.
Yeah, and absolutely. I mean, it was a Trump mandate, not a Republican mandate.
Yeah.
And that's why, bringing up the talking point of, oh, well, Republicans barely won the House really isn't valid when we discuss the mandate because it was for Trump. It was not for the Republican Party. But, going forward, when I look at our candidates, I think the issue I see is regardless of what angle they take, just not being Trump hurts them on the ballot. And a prime example of this, you bring up, okay, the establishment, the neocons do not represent the American electorate. 100% true. But you also see instances where people who try to be like Trump, like Carrie Lake, for instance, also struggle on the statewide level.
Right.
So, what's the solution? What's the happy medium? Or how do you go forward, do you think?
Well, I think you just gotta be yourself.
Yeah.
That's what I would tell those
Yep.
people. You gotta be yourself. Stick up for principles and policies that you think make sense. And you got to talk to voters about what they want. But you got to be yourself, because when you're a blowhard and you're trying too hard, that's when people kind of don't like it. I actually ended up talking to some Uber drivers because I was kind of driving around
Right.
in Arizona, and I talked to 3 of them, and 2 of them were Trump Gallego voters. And I asked them, why are you voting for Trump, or did you vote for Trump but not for Carrie Lake?
Right.
And they said, we like Trump because he sticks up for the American people and whatnot, but we just don't vibe with Carrie Lake. It's just vibes. And they're Hispanic. So
Right.
they're typically Democrat voters. So of course they're voting for Gallego because they can't relate to Kerry Lake the same way that they can relate to Donald Trump. That's just kind of something that I think is very important. That yes, you're not gonna friggin' be a Mitch McConnell or a Lisa Murkowski, but don't be like a Mehmet Oz or a Kerry Lake, where it's a little bit too much on the end. And I'm not saying that Kerry Lake is trying on purpose to be like Trump, but I guess it's just the way that she comes across. People kind of
No, I think being yourself is such a great point. I
Yeah.
think that's the strength of like JD Vance as the VP was that
Yes.
his ideas, his stances are very similar to Trump. Some of them I would
He has his
argue are
own
even
brand.
more
But he's
American
his own
first.
person.
Yeah, but
Yeah,
he's his
got
own
his
person.
own brand,
There
and
you
that's
go.
why I
His own
think he could be successful in 2028.
Yes.
Because he's not like a copycat version of Trump, because a copycat version of Trump isn't going to come across well because only Trump is Trump. That's why
DeSantis.
all these people that have like,
That's
that
why
made
Mitt
the-
Romney in 2012, when he was trying to do the Reagan clone thing, failed.
didn't
right?
work.
Yeah,
And that's why when all these other people talk about, 2020 results being shady or whatever, they get clowned down, but Trump doesn't. He can still win an election because Donald Trump is Donald Trump. These people are not Donald Trump. And obviously, we need candidates that will represent the Trump agenda, but they have to do so by being themselves, having their own brand, and that's how the Republican Party can become that MAGA America First Party that it needs to be, so it can compete in those elections with those ancestrally Democrat, as you mentioned, Trump Gallego type of voters.
Yeah.
And we'll move on actually in a second to talk about Vance, but I don't want to lose initially. We talked about, the Republicans, the House leadership. What are your honest thoughts on Mike Johnson as House Speaker? Like, is he the guy? Is he passable? Do you think Republicans should try the whole chaos thing for a new speaker, or how are we feeling right now about Mike Johnson?
I think right now our House majority is really small, and I'm not saying that Mike Johnson hasn't, he hasn't been perfect, but I think compared to Kevin McCarthy, he's been a little bit better. But I don't think we have a big enough House majority to go through 18 ballots right now. We need to get to 2026. We need to work with Scott Presler, TPUSA, Turning Point Action. We got to work with all these people to give ourselves a huge House majority in 2026, so that when we get there, then we're going to have the wiggle room to be able to get a new speaker in. But I think right now we're going to have to try to work with Mike as best as we can. Now, if he keeps, going out of his way to, just completely crush agenda while Trump is in office, because you've even said that you think Mike Johnson might be a little bit better once Trump gets in. But I think if he continues to do the same thing that he's doing now, then we kind of got to get rid of him. But I think it's important to get to 2026 to expand the majority, and then we can get somebody else in.
No, I agree with what you're saying, but it is going to be hard to expand the majority if you're not going to deliver results. And the thing I'll
That's
say
true.
about Mike Johnson is the guy is a very nice guy, and I think he does have decent intentions, but at the end of the day, you have to be a little ruthless to be in that speaker role.
That's true.
Now, I do think that because he's a pushover for Biden's agenda, he'll also be a pushover for Trump's, which is a good thing for us. But, we'll have to wait and see. But I don't want to necessarily try to vacate the speakership, because when we did that last time, we got Mike Johnson. Like, we have to understand power in politics, be realistic to a certain degree, and go from there.
I think one thing that hurt us in 2024 with the House was that the House GOP was just so dysfunctional on many levels, right?
Yeah.
Up in New York, which was very important for congressional races, the George Santos scandal probably kind of tarnished the House GOP over there. But I think when I look at Mike Johnson versus Kevin McCarthy, it's like Kevin McCarthy, his problem was obviously he's establishment, he's a neocon. I'm not saying I support him. But one strength he had was that he kind of ran the House GOP like a mafia boss, like a dictator. Like he kind of whipped people into line. I think with Mike Johnson, I could foresee an issue maybe going forward in 2026 that he can't control his party necessarily and present a unified image. Democrats with Hakeem Jeffries, like they'll probably be more united. And do you guys foresee that could be an issue? Because you mentioned him being a nice guy. That's sort of my concern with him at the helm. And you also combine that with the fact that he doesn't have the fundraising power of McCarthy, right?
No, I get it 100%. I think that he's somebody that does have good intentions. He had a great voting record beforehand, but it is true that if you have a party that's divided, he's not the type of guy that can control it. But I will say he's not calling the shots. Donald Trump is calling the shots. If he does what Donald Trump makes him do, then he could be a very, very good speaker for 2 years and hopefully for 4 years. But we're not there yet. We'll just have to see what happens when Trump gets in there.
Yeah, I kind of feel the same way, to be honest. We got to kind of wait and see, because once he gets in, and then Trump tries to start passing things, and then he doesn't really go through, then we got to kind of work it out. But I think right now we're at a time where, again, the House majority is 5 seats. I think maybe even 4 or something like that. It's very small. So I
Right.
think that's too risky to try to vacate the speakership, because if enough people decide to hop over for Jeffries for some reason because they're establishment,
Right.
then we're going to get a
And who are you gonna
Jeffries
get that's really
speaker
better than
while
Mike
we have the
Johnson?
House. Like, that's kind of dumb.
Yeah.
So I think right now we got to kind of play defense right now.
So for you guys, what's the electoral game plan for the 2026 election? How do we fix this problem where our House majority the past 2 times is so slim, even when
I
Republicans
think
do well?
that we need to get people, and this is something that, yes, Charlie and Scott Presler has talked to Scott last night. They are very passionate about chasing ballots, but we gotta chase people. We gotta vet people to run for these seats, because what happens is these people out of nowhere just come out of the woodwork and then they run, and turns out there's some sort of establishment rhino people. So that's really something that I think we got to focus on. We need to vet people when they run for the House or the Senate or anything. We got to have political committees or action groups that vet people or try to train people to kind of go into this type of field. I think that's something really important. And as for 2026, for the Senate, I think we need to flip the Michigan one, and we need to go ahead and flip the Georgia one too. Because right now, you're kind of noticing a trend also of, oh, I'm actually going to confirm Tulsi Gabbard. And then
Right.
John Fetterman, oh, yeah, I'm actually, Trump's thing was actually.
He's up in 28. But
Huh?
yeah, he's up in 28.
Yeah, in 28. But my point is, there's a pattern with senators right now that are trying to moderate themselves,
Right.
but I wouldn't trust them at all. It's
Right.
as trustworthy as Cenk Uygur.
maybe a little bit less.
Yeah,
Maybe a little
yeah.
bit less. But
Rep
no, I
thoughts
agree.
on
The
26,
House, definitely, they should also try to do mid-decade redistricting where necessary, increase
Yes.
the number of seats. Democrats, they are the biggest hypocrites regarding gerrymandering you could ever think of.
Yeah, look at Illinois. I mean, that's
Illinois, Connecticut, Maryland, all these states.
Yeah,
but,
after we gerrymander them, I don't want to hear them complaining about ever again, bro.
Exactly.
They're like, oh, gerrymandering, and then the reason why we got a slim majority was because they gerrymandered so hard, and then they're like, oh, see, look how bad they did, and it's like, oh,
Yeah, and I
really?
agree with candidate recruitment, the ground game, try to flip Georgia. Michigan and New Hampshire are long shots, but they could happen. Just depends on how popular Trump is, and we got to get our voters out to vote and flip a couple governorships, including the one right here in Arizona. I feel like that one could be primed to flip in 26.
Yes.
right. All right, last question here in this video. So we'll finish talking about 2028 because it just excites people. It's interesting. It's intriguing, even though it's so far away. It's funny. The Democrats talking about why they lost, they still don't really understand what we did on our side infrastructurally, right? Like they were like, oh, we lost because of Elon Musk or something. They don't understand that the ground game of the Republicans had to do with low propensity voters, turnout, chasing ballots, all that stuff, right? But my question is, do you think J.D. Vance is a guy who can? I don't think anyone's ever going to energize, say, white working class voters the way Trump did. But do you think he can suffice enough to turn out the coalition that voted for Trump?
I
in 2024?
100% think that JD will be able to do that. Now, will it be 95% of them? No, maybe it's 85, maybe it's 80 or 90. But I do think that he actually is able to appeal to some kind of college-educated voter that may not have voted for Trump, but may actually vote for Vance instead.
Yeah.
So you may see a state like Georgia, depending on who the nominee is, you may actually see a move right in 28 if Vance is the candidate, because I think he may be able to appeal a little bit more in Atlanta and those suburbs, even though they're growing with African Americans. I think he may be able to appeal there more, and in North Carolina as well. So I think that's something that is going to be really interesting to look at. And then the Democrats' shortlist sucks. They have Gavin, they have AOC, Tim Walz, Mark Cuban, and Kamala Harris is leading all the primary polling. So,
Right,
Should run again. Why not?
Yeah.
And it's interesting. I remember watching J.D. Vance's RNC speech, and one thing I noticed is he made a lot of women in the audience cry when he told his story. And I looked at that, I was like, that is a power that Donald Trump does not have that he has that might actually help in like the suburbs, for instance. But anyways, Rep, your thoughts on 28?
No, I think he's by far going to be the nominee, by far the most electable choice. And, it's about the electoral map. Republicans are shoring up Nevada, Arizona. They got Texas, Florida, probably win North Carolina, so long as, Trump has a decent second term. And it comes down to one Rust Belt state again. And Vance is from the Rust Belt. He's a Midwesterner. he's the only guy that can go out there and do it and get it done. I think he's going to be the nominee. And the Democrats, if if some miracle happens, they might have a shot. But I really feel like they're going to really struggle because they just don't know why they lost. They don't get it. They never will.
Yeah, and it's like the GOP has so many candidates, like the Marco Rubios of the world, that could probably win your Georgias, your Arizonas. But yeah, at the current moment, besides Trump, I think Vance is the only guy who I look at. I could say he could win Pennsylvania, he could win Michigan, he could win Wisconsin. But anyways, where can people find you guys?
At Red Eagle Patriot on Twitter, Red Eagle Politics on YouTube.
You can also find me on X at onpointpolitics and onpointpolitics on YouTube as well.
All right, you guys have been doing a great job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.